Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen.
Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth. I will only
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast and the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 31, so whether you're back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It's late Friday night, January 14th, and I am in a shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama. Also, I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal. World War II, that's where we're starting off the show tonight, because I learned something this week about World War II, and I wanted to share it with you, my babies. Did you know that World War II is the reason that bidets have never really taken off in America? Yeah, it's something I read on the internet. I think it's true. I haven't really fact-checked it, but essentially, the claim is that in World War II, American soldiers who were in Europe and other parts of the world where the bidet is a typical and normal feature of a public or private restroom, American troops were frequenting brothels. And at these brothels, they had bidets. So when our boys came home from war, the bidet in America became associated with houses of ill repute instead of sanitation. And so it's never really caught on here in America, although it's starting to a little bit now. I kind of think that if you have a bidet, then maybe you are rich, is how I feel, if I'm being honest. Now, I realize I have seen on TV this week, actually, that you can go online and buy a bidet that you can install yourself in your toilet for less than $100, which isn't a lot of money, and yet I still feel like if you have a bidet in your home, you are rich. That's just how I feel. I'm not sure anything could change that. I feel that way, and I think I would have one in my home. I do. I believe maybe we can be sponsored. In the Shed with Wes Anderson is brought to you by the bidet, not just for houses of ill repute, but for your house too. See, look, we need some sponsors. We got you. We growing every week by week. We building an audience together. There ain't that many of us yet, but we have some of the best fans all over the world. So yeah, we starting off the show with a bidet, taking you to the bathroom. I think last episode might have been the first time on our little show that we have talked about a celebrity death, talking about Betty White. It's not something that we're going to do every week by any means. But I do want to make mention this week that I'm sure you have seen it, that comedian and actor Bob Saget passed away. And I'm not going to lie, that one kind of messed me up. I have seen every episode of Full House. I grew up watching that show, my sisters and I. I enjoy Bob Saget as a comedian and a person. He wasn't really that old. I think he was like 65. That's not old. I used to think that was really old, but at 32, I don't think 65 is old anymore. That's just a couple years older than my pops. Coincidentally, in the artwork for our show, the picture that we have up, which is me your boy, your humble correspondent, the journalist, standing in front of the door of my shed. It looks like a barn door. Standing in front of the door of my shed, holding my microphone and my headphones. I actually have on a hoodie, the same hoodie that I am wearing right now. Thankfully, the weather is not too bad tonight. It's not too cold in the shed. I'm pretty comfortable. Thank you, global warming. Praise be to you. Take that, Al Gore. But in that picture, the hoodie that I'm wearing, the same one that I am wearing now, actually has artwork drawn by a family friend. And it's Bob Saget riding a weeping penguin. There were only about a dozen of these sweatshirts made that are in existence today, and I have one of them on right now. It's Bob Saget riding a weeping penguin. And there's a story that goes with that. I won't get into it or share it tonight on the show. We don't have enough time. But I always liked Bob Saget. I always found him to have a good sense of humor. Watched him on Full House. Watched him on America's Funniest Home Videos. Watched his stand-up, which was not family-friendly like his character Danny Tanner on Full House, but was still funny nonetheless. I even was a part of a group at a concert. And you know how it be at concerts. There's waiting for the bands to come out. There's different chants that are started where you chant something, you clap 3 times, whatever it is that you're saying. And, I've always kind of wanted to start a random chant. And so we started a chant of Bob Saget. Bob Saget. Bob Saget. And to our bewilderment, across the auditorium, we heard a chant back. Uncle Jesse, Uncle Jesse. Yo, these jokers ain't know who they was messing with. I'm a Full House historian, my babies. So we hit him with that Uncle Joey. They responded with DJ Tanner. We came back with Kimmy Gibbler. And that's how we won. They ran out of characters. I had about 15 more of them in my head. They ran out of characters. Hit him with that Kimmy Gibbler. Bob Saget was a husband and a father, a friend and a comedian. Rest in power, Bob, and prayers and good vibes to all of his friends, all of his family and loved ones, all those that he worked with. I was sad to see that he had passed away. I will wear this hoodie every winter proudly. I always get looks when I wear it. People are like, "What is that?" It's Bob Saget riding a weeping penguin, and now it's even more special to me than it already was. Before we get into comments and corrections, I do have to share one more quick story with you. I'm on pins and needles out here in the shed. I come out here almost every time that I record. It is late at night. I'm in a shed in the backyard of my home. Not the fenced in portion, but just in the backyard. And on my street, there happen to be people that walk for whatever reason down the street to get to the gas station, down the street to go wherever they're going. And, this microphone that I'm speaking into, it picks up all kinds of noises. You've already heard the fireworks. Sometimes on episodes you hear a dog barking. You hear one time a neighbor mowing the grass, cars going by if they have loud exhaust. And I was out here recording. I hadn't hit record, but I was sitting out here preparing. It was late at night. That night it happened to be close to 1 in the morning. And I heard somebody on the microphone talking. And I started to get a little bit freaked out. Because I ain't got windows in front of me the way that my desk is set up in the shed. I can't see what's going on outside of the shed. And I hear somebody's voice clear as day. A man's voice talking. And it freaked me out. And I'm not armed out here in the shed. So I took my headphones off. I walked outside. I looked around and I ain't see a soul. Nobody. And I surmised that probably somebody had been walking by on the edge of the road past the shed, not even knowing that I'm in here. And might have been talking to theyself, might have been talking on the phone, something like that. And my microphone picked up their voice. But it freaked me out. So I pick up my cell phone, being the good husband that I am. And I call my bride. And I tell her, hey, just to let you know, I heard somebody's voice clear as day. And just lock the front door. I think everything's fine. But just lock the door just to be safe. What does my wife do? She waits about 20 minutes. I'm out here covering politics and the world news. And she come out to my shed. And she pick up a stick from the yard. And she starts scratching on the window. And then she tap on the door. Tap, tap, tap. It scared me to death. Usually when I am recording this show, my wife is asleep, you guys. Like, she's in for the night, my babies. And she came out here in the middle of the night, put a jacket on, just to scratch the window and scare me. And typically I'm pretty hard to frighten. But she got me, and she got me good. So now every time I come out to record the show, I look her in the eye and I make her promise that she will not come out to this shed and scare me again. So yeah, bidets, rest in peace, Bob Saget, and my wife scared me. It's how we roll on In the Shed with Wes. Let's move on to some comments and corrections from our last episode. Keystone 335, Hanobia 314, Townsend 229. We're still a shade under 2,000 followers on Twitter, so if you are not already, go on over and follow us there at In the Shed 4. It's a great way to keep up with the show, and I love interacting with you all over there. We're still rocking and rolling in India, which makes up almost 30% of our listenership. And we are also growing in the UK, France, Australia. And I want to give a special shout out to our new listeners in Denmark this week. Welcome to the family, Denmark. We'd also appreciate it if you would download the Good Pods app and listen to and follow the show there. Our humble little show ranked number 3 for indie political news podcasts on that platform last week. And wherever you're listening, whether Good Pods, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, please do us a solid and leave us a 5-star review. If you continue to subscribe, like, review, and share the show, we will continue growing this thing together. On last week's show, I shared with you the incredible story of a woman attempting to breastfeed a hairless cat on a flight from Syracuse to Atlanta. But I failed to mention the airline that she was flying with. In retrospect, I'm pretty sure it was Spirit. It had to be Spirit. I'm going with Spirit Airlines. On our last episode, we also talked about a house fire that started accidentally as a homeowner attempted to combat a snake infestation. So I asked you on Twitter, how many snakes would it take for you to risk a house fire in defending your home against them? 38% of you said more than one snake. 25% responded 5 snakes. And 38% said 25 or more snakes. So it's a tie. Last week, we also covered the story of the missing 411 disappearances. While covering the strange cases, I made only passing reference to theories involving UFOs, Bigfoot, and the like in explaining the phenomenon. We might do the song later. On Twitter, I asked how you explain the mystery, with 34% saying unsolved kidnappings, 33% blaming UFOs, 22% going with wildlife, and 11% saying it is all just a coincidence. We got a great show for you tonight, but first let's get to some listener emails. Our first email comes from Jerome from New York, who writes, Wes, I agree with your analysis on the current landscape of mainstream media. I also think distrust is an issue as well. Fox News is all opinion, but CNN and MSNBC, while less exaggerated, are also regularly partisan and often misleading. Hey Jerome, thank you for listening to the show. I appreciate your feedback. I don't disagree with you. I think that there is certainly a clear breakdown when it comes to whether or not the average American trusts news media. And some folks have the one cable news channel that they watch, be it Fox News or MSNBC. A lot of folks really don't trust any mainstream media anymore. And I think that your deduction that a lot of that is because of how partisan those cable news channels and different mainstream media networks tend to be is right on point. Our next email comes from Jen from Phoenix, Arizona, who writes, Wes, it's been a while since I've heard anyone's paranormal experience shared on the show. Might I share mine? Well, of course you can, Jen. I'm glad you have written into the show. Let's see what you have to say and what you have experienced. It happened the other night while my boyfriend and I were driving back from a party at a friend's apartment. We were on a road a bit outside of the city when we saw a woman in a white dress walking along the side of the road. We only even saw her because our high beams were on, with us being the only car on the road at the time. I told my boyfriend to pull over and check on her. If she was out there by herself so late at night, I figured she must be in some kind of trouble. My boyfriend argued with me a bit as he was ready to be home and said that it could be a crazy person. By the time he agreed, he had passed her, so using the shoulder, he did a U-turn and headed back. We never saw her again. I guess she could have wandered off into the woods, but she was only out of sight for 30 seconds. It's like she vanished. It freaked us out so badly that we drove home in silence. Thank you for writing into the show. That would creep me out too. A lady in a white dress walking along the side of the road, only to disappear, never to be seen again. That's creepy. That's creepy. Don't know what to make of that story, other than I'm glad that you experienced it and not me. And I'm glad that you wrote into the show. One of my favorite things that happens is when you guys write into the show, not just with comments about the show or positive feedback, which I love, or just to say hello, but when you write into the show to share your experiences. I enjoy reading them and sharing them with the rest of our listeners, and that is a good story. That is a good story. And finally, Randy from Tampa writes, Wes, since you didn't talk about it on last week's show, I'm curious to know your thoughts on Antonio Brown. Hey, Randy, thank you for writing into the show. Thank you for listening, man. No, I didn't talk about it. If you are unaware, Antonio Brown, who was a wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he quit. He quit mid-game. Last game, he took his shoulder pads off. He was arguing with teammates and coaches, and he walked out of the stadium in the middle of a football game. And the coach kicked him off the team. He came back and said they were trying to make him play injured and he wasn't going to play. There's been a lot of back and forth. Honestly, Randy, the reason why I did not talk about it is because I really don't know what's going on. And I'm not a trained psychologist, but it appears to me, based on his behavior, not just with Tampa Bay, but previous to that, when he was briefly with the Patriots, when he was with the Steelers, in between teams, it just kind of seems to me like there's some things going on there mentally. I don't know. Some people say that he's a terrible person, a terrible teammate, a liar. He just doesn't have any morality. And I don't know Antonio Brown. It's possible that those things can be true, but I just wonder if there's not some mental health issues at play here. And when somebody is having an episode or a mental health issue, I'm not one to kick them while they're down. I'm not one to offer unprofessional advice. I'm not one to try and hold them to expectations that they're not capable of in the circumstances. And look, it's quite possible that Antonio Brown has mental health struggles and also is not a good person and also is not telling the truth and also is a bad teammate. I don't know. But because I don't know, I just didn't talk about it. I figured we'd actually cover football this week. We covered the games that are coming up, the playoffs, and I would just be the one person in sports media not to speculate on another person's mental health and not to trash them for the actions that they have taken without having a full understanding of what they're going through or what actually is happening. So, so that's why. I understand the question, Randy, but that's kind of where I'm at with that. That's all the listener emails this week. If you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. All right, let's switch to this. Let's get to the news in the world of politics, and let's hit the headlines. Disappointed Biden reacts to Supreme Court blocking his vaccine mandate, urges businesses to institute vaccine requirements, writes the American Spectator. Congress fails to extend child tax credit, 30 million families won't see checks, reports Newsmax. Russia moves more weaponry toward Ukraine, keeps the West guessing, says the Wall Street Journal. From the Washington Post, Vice President Harris's team plans to make changes to reset her political prospects. And finally, what he did is unbelievable, how Joe Manchin betrayed America's working families, and that is according to Alternet. Our first story in the world of politics, giant octopus caught red-handed murdering sharks in astounding footage from aquarium. Workers at an aquarium in Seattle were left scratching their heads after their population of sharks began to dwindle inexplicably. Divers had begun to find the semi-mutilated carcasses of dogfish, a member of the shark family, on the floor of the tank. Footage shot overnight in the tank showed the perpetrator to be a giant Pacific octopus weighing between 40 and 50 pounds. The huge predator was able to wrestle the much smaller sharks into submission before feasting on them alive, discarding their dead bodies after finishing the grisly task. "Oh, that's cheating. He flipped the shark upside down," said one viewer of the video. "When a shark is flipped upside down, it can't move. It basically falls asleep. It's called tonic immobility." While another user joked, maybe the octopus just wanted to give it a hug. Yeah, so our first story in the world of politics. Giant octopus murders shark. If you're new here, welcome to In the Shed with Wes Anderson, where we cover all the news that you want to hear. We keep it a buck with you, and you will not find octopus coverage like this anywhere else on the airwaves. Because this is like the third or fourth octopus story. We had, in the paranormal segment one week, we talked about whether or not octopuses, and it is octopuses, by the way, whether or not octopuses are aliens. They are. We also had a story we shared before about how scientists have observed female octopuses throwing shells at the male octopuses. And now we bring you this story of a shark murdering octopus in a Seattle aquarium. So apparently those working at the aquarium began to notice that some of their smaller sharks were disappearing. And imagine what they must have thought. Like, hey, we have 15 of them mugs, and now it's 12. And the next day, it's 10. What is happening to these sharks? Where are they going? They're in an aquarium. Is somebody stealing sharks? And then they review the footage of the hours where the aquarium is closed, only to find out that this 40 or 50 pound octopus, like, hey, that's a big squid. And this octopus is luring these little smaller sharks in towards him, and he's turning them upside down so that they are immobile, which means that the octopus knows what he is doing. Somehow this octopus is so smart. He is an octopus teacher level smart octopus. And he's turning these sharks over to immobilize them and then eating them alive like sushi. Octopuses are crazy. They crazy. They can't be from this planet. They are so smart. I'm afraid of an octopus. I would play chess with an octopus, but I'm afraid of an octopus. They out here murdering sharks. I mean, I guess they doing us a favor. Where was the octopuses during Jaws 1, 2, and 3? But octopuses are smart. And they're scary. And they're probably aliens. And you won't hear news like this anywhere else in the world. Except for from a journalist in his shed at 10:37 at night. You're welcome. Our next story in the world of politics, rapper Logic's song 1-800-273-8255, titled after the phone number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, saved hundreds of lives, a study found. A song by the rapper Logic titled 1-800-273-8255, the number of the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, prompted a surge in calls to the line and a reduction in suicides, a new study has shown. The study found that in the 34 days after 3 events, the song's release, the 2017 MTV Video Music Awards, and the 2018 Grammy Awards where the song was promoted, the Lifeline got an additional 9,915 calls, an almost 7% increase than the expected number for that period of time. The researchers think the song contributed to a decrease of 245 suicides compared to what was projected for that time span. Logic's song 1-800-273-8255 was associated with a large increase in calls to the Lifeline. A reduction in suicides was observed in the period of time that most social media discourse about the song occurred. In a 2017 interview with Genius, the artist said he was inspired to write the song after going on a cross-country tour where he would stop by fans' homes and hang out with them. Fans told him that his music saved their life. To know that my music was actually affecting people's lives, truly, that's what inspired me to make the song, Logic told CNN on Monday. We did it from a really warm place in our hearts to try to help people, and the fact that it actually did blows my mind. The study said that reporting on suicide deaths or potentially lethal actions can trigger more suicides, but other suicide-related narratives could have preventative effects. The study found that following reports on celebrity suicides, there was a 13% increase in suicides. However, the study said narratives like the one in Logic's song that talks about someone seeking help or stories about hope and recovery can also inspire people to seek help. Researchers noted that in the 28 days after the song's release, there was a 10% increase in Google searches for the Lifeline. Logic's song likely represented the broadest and most sustained suicide prevention messaging directly connected to a story of hope and recovery in any location to date, and is thus a serendipitous event for research, the study said. So a lot of times on this show, just like any news show, the news that we cover is not necessarily good news. And I try to be different on this show. We try to give you some silly stuff like the shark murdering octopus. We try to keep it lighthearted. We try to be honest with you, let you know what's going on in the world. But we also try to bring you stuff like this. When something comes across my desk or enters my purview that is just positive, that's encouraging, that should be celebrated, we want to give you that too. One of the main problems with mainstream media that I have and that I see is that most of it, because of advertising, because of trying to get viewers, because of competition with other news shows, a lot of it exists and is designed to gin up anger within you, to point out things that make you angry so that they can then say, we're the ones who are fighting it, listen to us, stick with us. A lot of it is to press your buttons and to spark outrage, because that's what gets the most interaction. And we don't do that on this show. We don't have sponsors. The only competition that we have is with ourselves to try and do a better show, to try and do a better job of covering the news and the stories that matter in an honest way, in a forthright way. I don't tell you what to think. I just share with you what's happening and let you decide for yourself. So in turn, that gives me the freedom to be able to share stories like this with you. And this is absolutely incredible. As I've shared with you on the show before, I am a bit of a hip-hop head, a hip-hop historian. It's my favorite type of music and has been since I discovered Tupac in the first grade. That's a true story. And there's no doubt that Logic is a talented rapper. Like, the man has bars, the man can spit, his cadence, his flow is nice. But even more than that, what he accomplished through this song is to give people hope and to lift people up, and to remind people that there is another way other than ending their life. I don't know if Logic is a religious man. I remember watching the Grammys. I had gotten home from work. My wife and I were flipping the channels. We saw the Grammys on. We thought we would stop there for a minute or two. And we saw Logic's performance of this song, the Hotline song. And it was moving. It was moving. It was incredibly touching. We watched the whole thing. We pressed pause on the DVR and talked about it afterward. If you haven't seen it, go to YouTube and look it up. It was a really well done performance of an important song. And I think at the end they flashed the hotline up on the screen so people would know that it's there. And a lot of times when celebrities do things like this, people go, oh, you just want to be patted on the back. You just trying to. This study shows that this man's song potentially saved 245 lives. And being that suicide is the leading or second or third leading cause for deaths in our young people, he probably saved 245 teenage or adolescent or young adult lives. And that's something that needs to be celebrated. That's some good news right there. 245 young people that didn't see a way out. That didn't see a possibility of wholeness and healing and hope. That didn't feel like they had the resources or the strength or the ability to reach out for the help that they probably knew that they needed. And this song was inspiring. This song was a lifeline. This song pointed them towards folks that could understand, folks that could listen to them, folks that could help them, connect them with the resources to receive healing and to start moving towards life again. And that's incredible. And I'm thankful for that song. And here on In the Shed with Wes, we celebrate you, Logic. We celebrate you. We give you a shout out. Tremendous work, tremendous job, and a scoop of good news for us tonight. Our next story in the world of politics, Biden shied away from news conferences and interviews in year one. In what's become a familiar scene, President Joe Biden lingered after delivering a recent speech on the pandemic as reporters fired a barrage of questions. He bristled at a query about the shortage of COVID-19 rapid tests, answered another about Omicron-spurred travel restrictions, and sidestepped a third about whether Senator Joe Manchin failed to keep his word when he torpedoed Biden's social services and climate spending plan. I'm not supposed to be having this press conference right now, Biden said at the end of a meandering response that didn't directly answer the question about Manchin. Why does he keep saying that? That is alarming to me that the President of the United States continues to say that when he's answering questions from the press. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I've been told I'm not supposed to answer these questions. I'm not supposed to be speaking with you. Like, hey, who is telling you that, Joseph? You are the president. You are the man in charge. You can talk to anybody you want to, big dog. And if they telling you not to and you doing it anyway, probably don't tell us you're not supposed to. It's not a good look, homie. Seconds later, Biden turned and walked out of the state dining room, abruptly ending what's become his preferred method for his limited engagements with the press. As Biden wraps up his first year in the White House, he's held fewer news conferences than any of his 5 immediate predecessors at the same point in their presidencies, and has participated in fewer media interviews than any of his recent predecessors. The dynamic has the White House facing questions about whether Biden, who vowed to have the most transparent administration in the nation's history, is falling short in pulling back the curtain on how his administration operates and is missing opportunities to explain his agenda. Biden does more frequently field questions at public appearances than any of his recent predecessors, according to new research published by Martha Joint Kumar, a professor emerita in political science at Towson University and director of the White House Transition Project. He routinely pauses to talk to reporters who shout questions over Marine One's whirring propellers as he comes and goes from the White House. He parries with journalists at Oval Office photo ops and other events, but these exchanges have their limitations. While President Biden has taken questions more often at his events than his predecessors, he spends less time doing so, Kumar notes. He provides short answers with few follow-ups and when he takes questions at the end of a previously scheduled speech. Biden has done just 22 media interviews, fewer than any of the 6 most recent White House predecessors at the same point in their presidencies. The 46th president has held just 9 formal news conferences, 6 solo, and 3 jointly with visiting foreign leaders. Former President Donald Trump, who regularly pilloried the media, did 92 interviews in his first year in office, more than 24 of those with friendly interlocutors at Fox News. But Trump also held lengthy sessions with ABC News, the Associated Press, the New York Times, Reuters, and other outlets whose coverage he impugned throughout his presidency. Biden's 22 media interviews have included one-on-one sessions with journalists at 3 of the major television networks, 3 CNN town halls, an appearance on MSNBC, a trio of regional television interviews via Zoom, as well as conversations with late-night host Jimmy Fallon and ESPN's Sage Steele. He's given just 3 print interviews. The White House has fielded requests from media outlets and complaints from the White House Correspondents Association for Biden to do more one-on-one interviews and formal news conferences. Press Secretary Jen Psaki has pushed back, arguing that a formal news conference with embroidered cushions on journalist seats is unnecessary since Biden answers questions several times a week. But those exchanges often don't allow for follow-up questions, and Biden can ignore questions he might not want to answer. Fleeting exchanges are insufficient to building the historical record of the president's view on a broad array of public concerns. We've had scant opportunities in this first year to learn the president's views on a broad range of public concerns, said Stephen Portnoy, president of the White House Correspondents Association and a reporter for CBS News Radio. The more formal exchanges with the press, the more the public is apt to learn about what's on the man's mind. So, this is a report from the AP. It's not from Newsmax, it's not from Fox News, it's not from a source that is far right or that is dead set against the president. And it's interesting to me that we are beginning to see, even with the mainstream press, a bit of exasperation when it comes to the amount of press and the amount of interviews that President Biden and his administration is willing to give. President Biden regularly holds news conferences and gives speeches, and occasionally when he's going from point A to point B, he will stop and answer questions from reporters. But he's not standing in front of a room of reporters and taking all questions as often as anybody who has been president in recent memory. And I kind of find that a tad bizarre, because if there is the narrative out there about you that exists on the right about President Biden, that he only reads off a teleprompter, that he's inarticulate, that he's not able to clearly state what it is that he believes about a host of topics, that he's not really the person in charge, that he's not making his own decisions, that there's a shadow president, whether it be Vice President Harris or somebody else. If that narrative exists about you, even from your detractors, why in the world would you play into it by having so few opportunities for the press to ask you questions about what you believe and what your administration is trying to accomplish and what steps you're taking to get there and what steps you're taking to lead the nation in the direction that you think that it should go? Like, for a while, I really do believe that a lot of the media, both left-leaning and center, celebrated the election of Joe Biden because they didn't get along well with Donald Trump. And they didn't like the direction that he was taking us. They didn't appreciate the chaos of a Donald Trump presidency. And now the tide is starting to turn. Because a year into his presidency, the whole "I'm not the last guy" routine is starting to wear thin even with the press. And they're starting to wonder, like, hey, where are you? Where you at? What you doing? Why won't you talk to us? Why won't you answer questions? Why won't you turn from the monitor and call on members of the press corps and answer the questions and answer a follow-up question? And look, when you are 79 years old, no matter who you are, the truth is that you're not going to be as sharp as you were when you were 65 or when you were 50 or when you were 45. It's just a fact. And we know what the right says about Joe Biden. They say that he's suffering from mental decline, that he has dementia, that he's not capable of answering these questions. And I've been very clear on this show that I am not a doctor, and I'm not willing to go there. But this isn't helping your case. It's not helping your approval rating for it to seem like you're not willing to hold press conferences, you're not willing to do interviews. Like, that's a bold strategy for your detractors on the right to say that he's not capable of stringing sentences together and he's in mental decline, and for you to go, I'll show them by not even speaking in public, by sticking to my prepared remarks. And when I do stray from it and I answer a couple of questions, by then saying, I'm really not supposed to be doing this. Like, that does not instill confidence. And it doesn't appear to be a good strategy to me. I might be wrong. What do I know? I'm just a guy in my shed. But it doesn't appear to be a strategy that's working for the president. And what we have seen all the way back to the time that he was running for president, even now that he is president, is we see these moments when a question is shouted that he does not like or that comes across as insulting to him. We see these times where he kind of snaps a little bit. Some people appreciate it. Some people think that it's unpresidential. But where he shows a little bit of a temper. President Biden has gotten snippy with people and snippy with reporters. And that might be fine and dandy if he was also answering the questions that were tougher, the questions that he thought were out of bounds, that tend to impugn him as president. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing him stick to his speeches, stick to his teleprompter, answer a few questions that are favorable to his administration, and largely ignore the rest. And while I'm not here to question his mental fortitude, I do question the strategy. When one of your campaign promises is that you promise to be the most transparent administration in U.S. history, you can't then get into office and hold far fewer press conferences and do less interviews than anybody before you and act like nothing happened and act like you didn't make that promise. And I think a lot of times Jen Psaki does a admirable job of defending and deflecting and holding the line for the president. But in this case, she comes off as sort of just mocking the press, as though them expecting that the leader of the free world would step up to the podium and answer some tough questions on a semi-regular basis is somehow asking too much. You made a promise, Mr. President. You promised the American people transparency. Transparency is really hard to accomplish from a distance. And your strategy is only playing into the hands of those that want you out of office. So I know you ain't asked for my advice, but since you're from Scranton, PA, and so is my uncle, I'll give you some free advice anyway. If you want your approval rating to increase, if you want to be able to accomplish something, if you want to earn the support of the American people once more, maybe start by answering some tough questions. Start by laying out your agenda point by point in interviews. Start by actively working against the narrative that has built up over time on the right, and show yourself as capable. Show yourself as up to the task, not just in action but also in word. And that's my advice to you, good sir. Our last story in the world of politics. Last president of Afghanistan said he only had 2 minutes to decide whether to flee Kabul and he didn't realize he was flying into exile until after takeoff. Afghanistan's former president has described making a sudden decision to flee the country as the Taliban closed in on Kabul this summer, BBC News reported. Speaking on BBC Radio 4's Today program, Ashraf Ghani said he only had 2 minutes to decide whether he should escape the capital. And when he made the decision to flee, he said he had no idea where he was going, first thinking he would head to the Afghan city of Khost. Ghani described how Taliban fighters surrounded the city on August 15th. He said they agreed not to enter the city but went back on that within 2 hours. Ghani said his security chief warned him that if he stood to fight, his troops could not resist and they would all be killed. The Washington Post reported in August that Ghani fled the country quickly without notifying his aides and allies, as he feared Taliban militants had gained entry to the presidential palace and planned to execute him. He did not give me more than 2 minutes, the former president told BBC. My instructions had been to prepare for the departure of the city to Khost. He told me that Khost had fallen, and so had Jalalabad. Ghani said that he was not aware he was flying into exile until his plane took off. I did not know where we will go, he told the BBC. Only when we took off it became clear that we were leaving Afghanistan. So this really was sudden. The former president is now living in exile in the United Arab Emirates. Ghani was criticized for his decision to flee Afghanistan. His former vice president, Amrullah Saleh, told BBC News in late August that the decision was disgraceful. It was alleged that Ghani abandoned the country with a suitcase filled with cash, Insider's Tim Porter reported. Ghani has denied this claim. I want to categorically state I did not take any money out of the country, Ghani told the BBC. My style of life is known to everyone. What would I do with the money? Ghani also said he was willing to take partial blame for the events that led to the fall of Kabul. He said one mistake was trusting in our international partnership, an apparent reference to the U.S. and its allies who withdrew their troops before the Taliban takeover. But he also added that he had been made a scapegoat and that his life's work had now been destroyed. So I thought that it would be about time to give an update on what is happening in Afghanistan. So the former president of Afghanistan has talked with BBC. He is in exile in the United Arab Emirates. And I got to say that a lot of what Ashraf Ghani says I find believable. Because there's no doubt that he and his army were made scapegoats, even by the American president. The comments that were made about how, we withdrew and we thought that the Afghan army, who we've given all this training and supplies and money to, would stand up and fight, and they didn't, and we're disappointed. We said at the time that those comments were reprehensible. And we've been over how the withdrawal from Afghanistan was both a necessity and a good thing, but was also handled in as poor a way as imaginable. And we're not here to relitigate all of that. But I'll just say that I do believe that the president would have been executed by the Taliban. And I do believe that he had probably had a very short amount of time to get out of there. And now the Taliban is in full control of Afghanistan. They are putting their own government into place. And what does it look like today? Reports say that possibly as many as 60,000 Afghan interpreters and American allies are still stranded in Afghanistan, even now. Speaking of things that President Biden has promised that have not quite happened, I seem to remember him saying that anyone that wanted to get out of Afghanistan, we would get out. And yet thousands and thousands and thousands of people who put their life on the line for us and for our troops are still stranded in Afghanistan today. Other reports have suggested that the UK rescued dogs from the city of Kabul instead of people, some of whom were then murdered by the Taliban. This was a stinging indictment that has been roundly denied by Boris Johnson and others in the UK, but was reported by multiple sources. And now the U.S. has frozen $9.5 billion in assets belonging to the government of Afghanistan. And we won't release the funds until the new Taliban-controlled government agrees to inclusivity in their government, the education of women, and to break ties with terrorist organizations, including Al-Qaeda. Currently in Afghanistan, it is a harsh and cold winter. Thousands and thousands of people are living in abject poverty without the ability to stay warm at night, without the food to feed their children. Look, I get the idea and the principle of not wanting a government controlled by the Taliban to have access to money. But let me ask you this. Do you think that the women in Afghanistan, the ones that all these people that were on CNN and MSNBC and ABC and CBS, all of these people, all of these experts were complaining about the withdrawal from Afghanistan because what about the women and children? What about the women that were in school, the women that had freedom? What about the kids? All of those people. I have a question for you. What do you think those women care about more? Whether or not there are 4 or 5 women in the government in Afghanistan, whether they're able to take college classes, or whether they're able to keep their children warm at night, and whether or not they have food to feed them. One of these things is not like the other. And look, I'm no fan of the Taliban government. I'm no fan of the atrocities that they have committed and will commit. I agree that they should have to cut ties with Al-Qaeda. I wish that they would allow for women to be educated. I wish their government was more inclusive. These are all good things. But to withhold the $9.5 billion in assets that belongs to the government of Afghanistan to try and make the Taliban stop being the Taliban is only hurting the people of Afghanistan. The country where we left 60,000 people stranded. The country where we pulled out our army in such a way that we left them without much of a chance. The country that we dropped bombs and drove tanks and sent our young men and women to die in so that companies that are a part of the military-industrial complex could reap hundreds of millions of dollars in no-bid government contracts. The people of that country are freezing to death, are starving to death, and we're going to hold out on releasing money to their government in hopes that a few more women can go to school and that the government might look a little different than it does today. We're blowing it. We're blowing it. And the Biden administration's response to this humanitarian crisis that's developing in Afghanistan is to pledge $308 million to Afghanistan through relief organizations, and why don't you just unfreeze their assets? I get it. The Taliban could do some bad things with that money, but listen, the fact is, if the Taliban wants to stay in power, they're going to have to make sure that people aren't starving to death all over their country and that people are able to heat their homes. They're going to have to use some portion of that money to relieve some of the suffering and poverty, or else their power will not be sustainable anyway. Do I trust the Taliban? No. Do I think that they will do some bad things? Yes. Are they our friends? Categorically, no. But in this situation, this $308 million that we are releasing American taxpayer dollars to relief organizations that we do not even know whether or not they will be permitted to operate in the country or what the timetable will be. That's not really anything more than a drop in the bucket. It's something that sounds nice but won't really amount to that much. We've done enough in Afghanistan. If we're going to pull out, if we're going to step back, unfreeze the money, be done with the country, be done with trying to be in charge over there. Let them feed their people, let them take care of their people, let them figure out things on their own, but let them have access to the money and the assets that do belong to their government, even if we're not friends with their government no more, even if we're not in control of their government anymore. I think it's some truth to what the former president of Afghanistan has said. I think that we made a mess in the country of Afghanistan, that we left it a mess. It's a humanitarian crisis, and it's a lot of innocent people, a lot of people that were our allies, who are suffering, who are hurting. I don't care what a country's government look like. The thought of children not even being able to put food in their bellies and stay warm in the wintertime is always going to be heartbreaking to me. So my prayers and good vibes goes out to those who are suffering in Afghanistan. And my hope is that this money will be released. My hope is that it will provide some relief for the people of Afghanistan. And maybe these relief organizations that are getting this money from the Biden administration, maybe they will be allowed in. Maybe it will happen a lot quicker than I imagine. And maybe some good will come out of it. But it's a mess. It's a mess in Afghanistan. And we're not seeming to make it any better. And I just wonder, all that money spent, all the lives lost, both American and otherwise, all the time poured into, the resources poured into that country, are they even any better off than they were before? Did we accomplish any good that has been sustained? And is the mess that we left bigger than the one that we inherited? I think about these things, and I haven't heard it talked about on CNN, and I haven't read about it in the New York Times. And you can look up these things that I'm talking about. It's all verified reports. And that's an update on what it looks like in the nation of Afghanistan under Taliban rule in the depths of winter. And that's the news in the world of politics this week. That's all for the world of politics. Let's switch to this, the news in the world of sports, and let's hit the headlines. UCLA and football coach Chip Kelly agreed to extension through 2025. Ex-Dolphins coach Flores interviews for Texans coaching vacancy. Kirk Ferentz in Iowa reach extension through 2029. Patriots left tackle Wynn out versus the Bills. Edwards-Helaire out for the Chiefs. Auburn and UCLA ascend to top line in latest NCAA tournament projection. Lakers optimistic AD returns by end of the month. Knicks acquire Cam Reddish from the Atlanta Hawks. And committee says now is not the time for college football playoff expansion. Our first story in the world of sports, Canucks staffer thanks NHL fan who spotted cancerous mole. The Vancouver Canucks are celebrating what they call a very special win, success in hunting down a woman who suspected a mole on a staffer's neck was cancerous and ended up saving his life. On Saturday, the NHL team tweeted a letter from Brian Red Hamilton, an assistant equipment manager who was looking for a very special person who was in the crowd during a game in October in Seattle. To this woman, I'm trying to find you. You changed my life, and now I want to find you and say thank you very much, Hamilton wrote. On the evening of October 23rd, the woman was seated behind the Canucks bench during a game against a new franchise, the Seattle Kraken, and was trying desperately to get Hamilton's attention. She had the idea of writing a message on her cell phone and holding it up to the glass partition separating the stands from the Canucks bench so Hamilton could read it. The message read, "The mole on the back of your neck is possibly cancerous. Please go see a doctor." An hour after the team tweeted Hamilton's letter, which quickly went viral, the Canucks managed to track down the woman, Nadia Popovici, a 22-year-old student who was recently accepted into medical school and also has a really dope name. Nadia Popovici. Nadia Popovici. Nadia Popovici. Hey, Nadia Popovici. Hey, Nadia Popovici. I'm thrilled. The whole reason the letter was written was because I really wanted her to know that her persistence and everything she did was taken seriously, Hamilton told a press conference after Popovici was located. He said he had never even noticed the spot that she detected, which turned out to be malignant melanoma. Doctors removed it. "She's a hero," Hamilton said. "I want you all to know this isn't about me. It's about an incredible person taking the time to notice something concerning and then finding a way to point it out during the chaos of a hockey game." On Saturday night, Popovici and Hamilton met. He thanked her with a hug as the Canucks again played the Kraken in Seattle. The Canucks posted a video of the meeting in which Popovici says she will start medical school later in 2022. "What an amazing way to start my journey to med school. It's pretty priceless. I mean, I'm so happy for you that you got it checked out," Popovici, wearing a Kraken jersey, told Hamilton. "Yo, this lady saved this man's life. And when she went to meet him, she wore the other team's jersey. Popovici a gangster. Popovich don't care. Look, I saved your life, but I'm still going to rep my squad. She a Kraken fan, Popovich. The two teams announced during the game that they were donating $10,000 towards Popovich's medical studies, and that's pretty dope. Again, this is an example of some good news that we found that we thought was worth sharing. And maybe Miss Popovich will hear this and she'll be a guest in the shed with Wes Anderson. That would be pretty cool. We could talk about moles and hockey and medical school and I don't know, maybe whatever else just came up naturally with Miss Popovich. Maybe some family history. Yeah, but how crazy is that? This lady is at a hockey game, and somehow through the glass partition, she sees somebody on the other team's bench that has a mole on the back of their neck. And she's like, yo, that's concerning. And then she makes it her mission to get the attention of this man and let him know. And as a result, he had this thing removed. That's an incredible story. I think Miss Popovich gonna make one heck of a doctor. And maybe she should get her own reality show where she just be out in public places spotting cancerous moles, you know? She'd be at the Pizza Hut talking about, excuse me, waitress, that's concerning. She'll be in the public park and she'll walk over to the person tossing the Frisbee with their brother talking about something, excuse me, sir, that's concerning. It could be called That Looks Concerning with Dr. Popovich. And I think it's a hit. I think that's a hit TV show right there. I am trademarking it. And the rights can be negotiated for a fee. So get at me. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter, Miss Popovich. DM us. Let us know when you want to get on the show. We'll have you on. Okay, moving on to our next story in the world of sports, the College Football National Championship game. If you remember, our official In the Shed with Wes Anderson prediction for the game was Georgia 27, Alabama 17. And we were pretty doggone close. We were pretty close. Georgia won the national championship, defeating Alabama and getting revenge, winning the game 33-18. We posted about an hour before the game started on Twitter our official prediction that we had also shared on the podcast last week. And we said, how will this tweet age? We'll know in about 3 hours. Well, it aged like fine wine, my babies, because we were dead on accurate. When we previewed the game, the 3 questions that we talked about that we thought would decide the game, the first was, can Stetson Bennett perform when it matters most? And the answer to that question was yes. Stetson Bennett did not play an overwhelming, incredible game, but he was 17 for 26 for 224 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did have a fumble, but no interceptions. And even after the fumble, Stetson Bennett came back and made a couple of really nice touchdown passes in big moments for his team. So did Stetson Bennett come through when it mattered most? Absolutely, resoundingly, 100% yes, he did, to the amazement of a lot of Georgia fans and certainly some Alabama fans as well. The second question was, can Georgia pressure Bryce Young? Again, the answer was yes. Georgia didn't get as many sacks as I would have thought they needed to in order to beat Alabama, but they got constant pressure on Bryce Young all night long. They made him uncomfortable. They hit him routinely. They did get through with a few sacks. They made him uncomfortable. Bryce Young was 35 for 57 for 369 yards, but he threw 2 interceptions. He only had 5 all year coming into the game. And look, anytime in a college football game, if you're throwing the ball 57 times, that's usually not a recipe for success. If you are Texas Tech, or you are Washington State, or you are Hawaii, or SMU, or Mississippi State, or some team with a Mike Leach type offense, that's another thing. But for most teams, if you're throwing the ball 57 times, not a recipe for success. And it wasn't for Alabama. The last thing that we said would decide the football game is who won the turnover battle. And again, that was Georgia. 2 turnovers to 1. Stetson Bennett had the fumble. Alabama had 2 interceptions and also had a fumble return for a touchdown that was ruled an incomplete pass and brought back. But Georgia took better care of the football than Alabama did, and all of those things were a part of why they won the game. A lot of people were picking Alabama to win this game. It's hard to pick against Nick Saban. It's hard to pick against Bryce Young. Alabama had throttled Georgia the first time that they played. But the reason why I picked Georgia in this game is because I just had to trust what I had seen all year long. I watched both of these teams play almost every game that they played this year, and other than the SEC championship game, Georgia was clearly the better football team all year. Alabama had the certain advantage when it came to quarterback, a slight advantage when it comes to head coach, but other than that, the talent pool was pretty even. Alabama's top 2 receivers are better than any receiver that Georgia had, but on the defensive line and on the offensive line and across the rest of the field, it was a pretty even matchup. And throughout the season, Georgia was certainly the best team in college football. So while it was difficult to pick against Alabama, it always is because they win almost every time they hit the field. They have a collection of 5-star talent and the best football coach in college football history. I believe that Georgia was the best team all year. I had them ranked in my poll, number 1, almost the entire season. And I just had to believe that the SEC championship game was more of an anomaly and that Georgia would right the ship, would come into this championship game angry, and that they would come out on top. And that's what they did. Kirby Smart finally beats Nick Saban. And Alabama reloads for next season. They will be better next year than they are this year. They've got a lot of youth on their football team. And look, this isn't one of the better Alabama teams. That's the crazy part. This team was a couple of bad breaks away from being a 3 or 4 loss football team this year. And yet they didn't lose those games. And yet they won the SEC. And yet they made the championship game and came fairly close to beating a really good Georgia football team. So Alabama fans have very little to hang their head about, but Georgia was clearly the best team in college football this year. Congratulations to Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs. And congratulations to us. We had a pretty good year when it comes to breaking down college football for you, including our prediction for the championship game. We were right there. We were right there on the money. And we were certainly the most accurate of any college football championship preview that came from a shed. All right, since our national championship game has been played, it's time for us to give you our final In the Shed with Wes top 25 college football rankings of the season. Now that the season is over, these are the final 25 teams that we feel like were the best in college football this year. Number 1, Georgia. Number 2, Alabama. Number 3, Cincinnati. Number 4, Michigan. Number 5, Baylor. Number 6, Ohio State. Number 7, Oklahoma State. Number 8, Michigan State. Number 9, Louisiana. Number 10, Notre Dame. Number 11, Oklahoma. Number 12, Houston. Number 13, Kentucky. Number 14, Ole Miss. Number 15, Clemson. Number 16, Coastal Carolina. Number 17, Utah. Number 18, Pittsburgh. Number 19, Utah State. Number 20, Wake Forest. Number 21, San Diego State. Number 22, UAB. Number 23, BYU. Number 24, UCF. And number 25, UTSA. So that is our final In the Shed with Wes top 25 college football rankings. It's been a fun season covering college football. I'm already missing it and can't wait for next season. We did pretty well in every category except for in our In the Shed with Wes Solid 7. As you know, this season, every Saturday, every week we would do our In the Shed with Wes Solid 7, where we would select 7 college football games and pick against the spread with the goal of getting 53% of our predictions correct, because that's what it takes to be in the money. We picked 7 games a week. We also picked every single bowl game and the playoffs. And at year's end, we fell short of our goal, my babies. And to keep it a buck with you, we really didn't even come that close, because the goal was 53% correct. And we finished a year at 45%. Our first year doing an In the Shed Solid 7, we got 45% correct. That's not even half. That's quick math, but that's not even half. And certainly far short of our goal. We were right there. We were going to hit our mark up until the last month and a half of the season, and then we just crashed and burned. We actually did pretty well in the bowl games, and in the playoffs we were above 53% for that. But as a whole, we failed this year. We failed this season, 45%. So we will try again next year and see if we can continue the momentum we had early on in the year, and if we can hit our goal. Before we head to the world of the paranormal, we've got to talk NFL playoffs, and this is our In the Shed with Wes Anderson NFL playoff preview extravaganza. Yeah. So the NFL playoffs are starting this weekend, and we're just going to go through. In the AFC, the NFC, we're going to pick the games, let you know how we see things shaking out. And, there's always some surprises in the NFL playoffs. So we have some surprises built in. And you'll probably hate my picks, but this is what I'm guessing. This is what I see happening. In the AFC, the Chiefs take on the Steelers. And I think this is Big Ben's final game in the NFL. I think the Chiefs win 24-13 over the Steelers. I think the Steelers keep it close early, but the Chiefs just have too much talent even without Edwards-Helaire. And I think that Pat Mahomes and his team moves on to the next round. The 11-6 Buffalo Bills take on the New England Patriots. And I think the Bills win. In the regular season, those teams split the series 1 game apiece. Bill Belichick is an incredible football coach and a tactician. He will have his team prepared, but I think that they'll also be outmanned. I know Josh Allen has a history of doing some silly things in playoff games, but he's certainly the best quarterback on the field in this matchup and has the experience over the rookie in New England. And I think the Bills win by a score of 21-6 and move on to the next round. Then we have the 10-7 Bengals versus the 10-7 Raiders. And I love the story that is the Cincinnati Bengals. What a year it has been for Cincinnati football, both in college and at the NFL level. And I love Joe Burrow. I love Jamar Chase. I love Zach Taylor. I love what the Bengals are building there. But I think the Raiders win. The Raiders, who have been through so much this season, with everything that happened surrounding John Gruden, with everything that unfolded with Henry Ruggs, they've been through the ringer, and they finished the year winning their last 4 games. They started the year hot. They finished the year hot. They have a good running game. Derek Carr is playing lights out. I think the Raiders win. I think the Raiders win a close one, 23-21. And that would mean that the next round of the AFC playoffs look like this. The number 1 seed Tennessee Titans would be playing the Raiders. And I have an upset. I have the Raiders beating the Titans in a low-scoring affair, 17-13. And then that would also mean that the Chiefs would take on the Buffalo Bills. And I have the Bills winning 27-21. I think that the Bills are a dangerous football team. They're good on offense and defense. They're explosive. And let's be honest, even though they're one of the better teams in the NFL overall, they're the 2 seed in the AFC, The Kansas City Chiefs have just struggled to be consistent this season, especially on defense, and they haven't really lived up to the hype. They haven't put the same product on the field that we've come to expect. So I think the Buffalo Bills pull an upset, and I think the AFC Championship game is going to be the Buffalo Bills and the Las Vegas Raiders. I think a Las Vegas Raiders football team is going to the Super Bowl. Yeah, I'm probably the only person in America, maybe the only person outside of Vegas predicting this, but I think in the AFC Championship game, the Raiders defeat the Bills by a score of 21-17, and I think that the Raiders are going to be playing for a world championship. In the NFC, I don't even want to hear the NFC. I'm still stuck on the AFC. How you predict the Raiders? Well, I don't know, but I did. In the NFC, the Buccaneers play the Eagles in the first round. And while the Eagles are a dangerous team, I don't think that the Buccaneers get tripped up. I think the Bucs win by a score of 31-13. Then the 3-seed Cowboys take on the 6-seed 49ers. And I think this is a game that could go either way, right? The Cowboys have the more explosive offense. The 49ers have the more well-rounded team, in my estimation. I'm just not sold on the Cowboys. They've been up and down all year. I think Jimmy Garoppolo plays better than expected. I think the 49ers defense plays well. And I think the 49ers win a close one, 17-14. I think they kick a late field goal for the win, and they eliminate the Cowboys in the first round. Good luck holding on to your job, Coach McCarthy. The next game on the schedule is the Rams versus the Cardinals, and I think the Rams win. I know it's trendy to pick the Cardinals. They had a great season. Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray seem to be a really good fit. Arizona has a lot of veterans that make a difference, a lot of young players that make a difference. But I think the Rams win. I think the Rams making an upgrade at quarterback is going to pay off. I think that they're a team that is looking for redemption, that's on a mission. I think they do enough to win the game, and they beat the Cardinals 28-24. That sets up a second round that looks like this. The Packers, the top seed overall in the NFC, versus the 49ers. And I think the Packers win relatively easily. I think it'll be a somewhat low-scoring game, but I think the Packers win by a score of 24-14. They're a better team than the 49ers. Aaron Rodgers is a man scorned. He's on a mission, and the Packers advance to the NFC Championship game where they play the Bucs. I think the Buccaneers defeat the Rams in the second round by a score of 28-23. I think Tom Brady and the Buccaneers just have too much for the Rams. I think the Bucs defense is going to be a lot like last season. I think they're going to come alive right as the playoffs begin and hit a hot streak. And I think we get a rematch in the NFC Championship game of the Packers and the Bucs. And I think the Packers win. I think it's going to be a back-and-forth game, one of those type of games where whoever has the ball last wins. And I think that's going to be Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is going to lead his team down the field. They're going to kick a field goal as time expires to beat Tom Brady, to eliminate him and the Buccaneers from the playoffs with a final score of 28-27, and that will set up a Super Bowl matchup of the Las Vegas Raiders and the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers wins the Super Bowl 31-24, wins Super Bowl MVP, decides in the offseason to remain in Green Bay, and that's how things are going to unfold. That's how I see it happening, my babies. In college football, we were dead on the money. Will we be dead on the money when it comes to the NFL? Probably not. Probably not, but we're taking a big swing. That's my shot. I'm like Babe Ruth. I'm calling my shot. The Raiders are going to hit a hot streak and make the Super Bowl, and they're going to lose a close one to the Green Bay Packers. Yeah. What do you think? Who do you see making the Super Bowl? Where did I go wrong? What upsets did I call that are impossible? Which ones did I miss? Get at us and let us know. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Or you can find us on Twitter at intheshed4. I would love to hear what you think. How are the playoffs going to unfold? What's going to happen? Let me know. That's all for the world of sports. Let's switch to this, the world of the paranormal. For our first story, we go to the Canadian border. It took a pandemic but the mystery of the Windsor Hum might now be solved. For a decade, Canadians living near the U.S. border swore they could hear a strange reverberation. It became known as the Windsor Hum, named for the Ontario city near the border with Michigan. The low-frequency component tended to shake people's houses, windows, and etc. Enter Colin Novak. He's a scientist from the University of Windsor who studies the hum as a part of a Canadian federal government investigation. You had a lot of conspiracy theorists trying to explain the hum, who said it was military experiments or, something from outer space. It was probably not. Novak says the mystery may now have been solved. 99%, I would say. I consider it solved. The breakthrough came a few months ago when the hum just stopped. At the same time, an American steel factory stopped its operations on nearby Zug Island. U.S. Steel was going to shut down some of their operations this year on Zug Island, Novak says, and part of that would include the blast furnace. Once those blast furnaces went quiet in April, so did the hum. There have been no complaints as far as I'm aware about the hum since they shut down their operations, Novak says. Novak doesn't expect the hum to come back, but there is a downside. He thinks U.S. Steel is permanently moving its operations out of the area to cut costs, so some jobs likely aren't coming back either. So, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story of the Windsor Hum before hearing this story. It's something that I've been familiar with for a few years now. And in preparing for this week's show, it was something that I thought would be worthwhile talking about. It was a years-long mystery that has existed on the Michigan and Canadian border, where nearly every day people hear this reverberation, or I guess I should say they feel it, and it shakes their houses. And they hear it in their ears, but they feel it in their body, and nobody knows where it comes from or what's happening. There's no explanation. Local authorities and governments have been kind of hush-hush about it, have not really explained it away. And there's all these conspiracies that have to do with UFOs and aliens as a government experiments and experiments with weaponry. And it turns out that it probably is this steel factory that was operating on a nearby island and that had a blast furnace that was causing these reverberations. Mystery solved. Since the steel factory has shut down operation, this Windsor Hum has also gone away. And I didn't ever see that be listed as one of the possibilities. I do remember reading something about the island, but I think it was in the vein of the steel factory being some type of cover-up for government experiments or something of that regard. And it just goes to show you that sometimes these mysteries and these things that have a paranormal bent to them turn out to be something that we can explain. I would love to know the science behind why the hum existed and why what was happening in this blast furnace caused people to feel these reverberations and kind of hear this noise that they have dubbed the hum. That would be pretty interesting to me. Do you know how that happened? Do you know scientifically what would cause that to happen? If you are more well versed in the subject, feel free to email the show at intheshed@gmail.com and let us know, and I'll be quick to share it. But I thought it was fun that that happened to be on my mind, the Windsor Hum. Let's talk about it on the show, only to find out that during the pandemic it has actually been solved. So look out, case of D.B. Cooper. Look out, John Benet Ramsey case. Look out, real killer that OJ's been trying to find for years, because during the pandemic, people got the time, and the mysteries are getting solved. And maybe one of you is next. For our next story, we go from the Canadian border to Chandlerville, Illinois. That's right, the Bluebird State. I just made that up, but it might be true. Very reliable sighting of Bigfoot in Illinois reported to the BFRO. For the uninitiated, that's the Bigfoot Research Organization, or the Bigfoot Field Research Organization. 59-year-old Patrick Garver submitted a report to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization near the end of November 2021, describing an encounter with the large hairy biped had while driving north on Route 78 near the Sangamon River after leaving Chandlerville, Illinois. According to Garver's report, it was approximately 10:30 p.m. on November 29th, with clear weather and stars shining when he had his experience. Saturday night, I was driving at 10:30 p.m. in central Illinois, heading from Cass County to Tazewell County. A car was probably 3/4 of a mile ahead of me and I could see their taillights. I saw a large animal jump onto the road about 40 yards ahead. When it hit the road, I could see very large legs spread wide in a dead run with large swinging hairy arms. The arms switched back and forth close to the ground as its body was leaning forward. It leapt across the road in 2 jumps. When it hit the shoulder, it looked back at me. I said to myself out loud, "It's an effing Bigfoot." I don't know why that's funny to me, but it just is. It was about 2 seconds before it vanished in the darkness altogether, but I could see it clearly. It was very large, and even though it was hunched over nearly horizontal, it still was close to being wider than my car and nearly to the top of my windshield. It blocked out the lights of the car ahead. It had shiny black hair. I could not see its eyes or mouth, but I saw its head turn toward me before it jumped into the dark field. It was running and leaping very fast, Garver added, nearly as fast as a white-tailed deer. Its gait and stride was huge. Although Garver was alone at the time of the sighting, he did discuss the incident at work. "My coworker says hunters, fishermen, and barge operators have had multiple sightings in the same area," he said. "Supposedly, the locals say a clan of Bigfoot lived there, and they're not threatening to humans." Then let's not call them a clan. If they're not threatening the humans, let's not call them a clan. Can we just say a group of Bigfoot or a family of Bigfoots or, a cackle of Bigfoots? Let's say some big feet even, because feet is plural for foots. So let's say some big feet live over there, but let's not say clan. BFRO investigator Matthew Moneymaker later described Garver's sighting as very reliable after having spoken extensively with the witness over the phone. That's the guy from the Bigfoot TV show, Matthew Moneymaker. The sighting reported was listed as Class A, which according to the BFRO is reserved for clear sightings in circumstances where misinterpretation or misidentification of other animals can be ruled out with greater confidence. Garver, said Moneymaker, has been a design engineer for the past 38 years designing parts for custom welding machines and is married with 2 children in college. He was not particularly interested in the Bigfoot subject, but he recognized what he was seeing, Moneymaker explained. He was driving 70 miles per hour and didn't slow down much until he reached the next town. He kept going, then stopped in Havana, the next town, to text his wife and kids to say that he had seen a Bigfoot cross the highway. Moneymaker said Garver described the creature as running frighteningly fast across the highway from left to right in an open field. Garver thinks the encounter happened at a bit further north on 78, further into the open field, he said. There was no cover on either side of the road at that point, so it's impossible for him to pinpoint the exact crossing point. Moneymaker said Garver was surprised that his encounter was the first posted visual sighting report for Cass County in Illinois, although he noted that Sangamon County, just southeast of Cass, has 13 posted sighting reports, while Fulton County to the north has had 12 posted reports. Also mentioned by Garver was that Cass County is very sparsely populated. According to the United States Census Bureau, the population of Cass County, spread out over 384 square miles, was 13,042 in 2020. Moneymaker added that Garver agreed to make a sketch of the figure so it can be added to this report later, although at the time of this article's publication, no sketch has been added. So I thought that was interesting. A reported Bigfoot sighting in Illinois that has been deemed very reliable after checked out by the BFRO. And I just got to say, if anybody is going to see a Bigfoot, don't somebody named Garver sound like a person that would see it? I'm just saying, doesn't a person named Garver sound like somebody that would see a Bigfoot? And I'm not casting aspersions on this man. He very well may have seen a Bigfoot. As you well know, I am a hopeful skeptic. I think that there could be some type of ape-like creature that is living in North America in the wilds that there's just very few of, or that are very elusive. I think that the idea is possible. I would love to see some proof. But I think that it is possible, and I think that this is an interesting circumstance. He was alone, so there was nobody else with him, unfortunately. But he did stop, and he did text his wife and his kids. He did talk to coworkers about it. It doesn't appear to be a story that he just made up. It's very close to an area where there have been 10, 15 sightings in the last bit of time. So it's interesting. It's an interesting sighting of a Bigfoot. And the way that he described its gait and its arms, the color of its fur, it was all very interesting to me, the size of it. What do you think? Do you think that Garver actually saw a Bigfoot? Is this going to be on an episode of Finding Bigfoot in the near future? Are we going to see this man in Illinois talking about what he saw? It's something to keep an eye out for. It's something to watch for. And just remember, if you do, that you first heard about it on In the Shed with Wes Anderson, where we bring you all of the Bigfoot news that we come across, because it's fun to think about, and because I hope he's out there. From the woods of Illinois, we go to a possibly haunted brothel for our next story. Yeah, you heard me right. Demi Lovato sings to ghosts to help them overcome trauma caused by sexism. Yes, international pop star Demi Lovato sings to ghosts to help them overcome trauma caused by sexism. Footage shows Demi Lovato singing to a ghost after it supposedly revealed it had experienced trauma caused by sexism, a performance that earned them a standing ovation. Lovato has been exploring their interest in supernatural life in recent docuseries entitled Unidentified with Demi Lovato. In one clip, we see Lovato join their friend Matthew Scott and paranormal investigator Chris Smith to visit Vulture City, an old ghost town in Arizona. According to Peacock TV, the trio came across a spirit who has past trauma with men while in an abandoned brothel, having set up an EMF detector, a special device that lets out a noise whenever it communicates with a spirit. Lovato asked the spirit known as Carmen, "Have you seen anything like ETs here, or UFOs, or star people?" Initially, the machine lets off a noise, but when Lovato asks Carmen if they are a star person, or individuals believed to have originated from another world, dimension, or planet, it falls completely silent. As the two men leave the room, Lovato then says, "Did you not want to say anything else because the boys were in here?" The device then makes a noise, at which point Lovato continues, "I get that a lot. She has trauma. That's why she doesn't like men." Lovato then tells Carmen, "I have trauma too, so I feel you. I get it." Speaking from outside the room, the two men suggest Lovato sing to Carmen. "Well, I always sing Skyscraper when I feel like singing something emotional," the singer explains, before launching into a spontaneous rendition of the hit. As they finish the excerpt from the song, the machine makes a noise, which the three take as a sign of a standing ovation. "That's the coolest standing ovation I've ever had," Lovato says. The docuseries was released a couple of months ago, but the clip has resurfaced on Reddit, where it soon went viral, racking up 10,800 upvotes. In a later interview with Face to Face with Becky G, Lovato spoke about their experience at Vulture City, saying, "We were originally setting out to research for UFOs and ETs, and then we came across this city called Vulture City. Vulture City is known for these ghosts that live in an old brothel, so we set up those machines, and I decided to sing for them, and they went off when I finished." Lovato believes that the responses on the EMF detector was a sign of approval from the spiritual world. "I've never had a standing ovation from ghosts, but I like to think that they were standing," they added. So much about that story. So many questions for Demi. Do ghosts have to give is it possible for a ghost to give a standing ovation, first of all? Because when I think ghost, I think more of Casper, the friendly ghost who has no legs. I don't know how he would give a standing ovation. But if we're just talking about a person, but people have legs, but this is a spirit. Do spirits have legs? Do they need to stand? Do they float? Ooh, I don't know if a ghost can give a standing ovation. I'm just not sure about that. But beyond the issue of whether or not ghosts have legs, it seems to me that Demi Lovato was engaging in a lot of projection onto this ghost that she named Carmen, because she wasn't hearing any voices that I'm aware of. It didn't say so in the article anyway. She just has a machine that lets off a beep when there's a spirit present or when there's some type of energy present, and the machine happened to beep. And that's all that was happening in this situation. She didn't see anything. She didn't experience anything. She had a machine that made some beeps. And she seemed to project a whole lot onto it. Maybe she was just making good TV. Maybe she believes that all of what she said and did was 100% above board. But it's an entertaining clip nonetheless. And the headline is pretty funny to me. Demi Lovato sings to ghosts that experience trauma due to sexism. No, Demi Lovato sings for TV camera after machine beeps. That's what it should have said. It should have said Demi Lovato sings for television camera after machine beeps. Not saying that spirits aren't real, not saying that Demi Lovato doesn't care. I'm just saying that the machine just made a beep and the ghosts don't have legs. We will put it up on Twitter. Do ghosts have legs? Can ghosts give standing ovations? I'm saying no. I'm saying no. And from a haunted brothel, we go to Graceland for our last story. Did Elvis Presley fake his own death? Elvis Presley faked his own death after paying a terminally ill lookalike to be buried in his place. The People can sensationally reveal. Two respected Elvis aides, Marty Lacker and Elvis's cousin Billy Smith, say that although the body found slumped in the bathroom of Elvis's Graceland mansion August 16, 1977 was certified dead, the real Elvis was hundreds of miles away. He had fled in a black camper van with the mysterious lover known only as Maria. Marty and Billy say the king of rock and roll is still alive, and the man buried in Memphis, Tennessee is a cancer victim named Scott, who is paid by Elvis to have plastic surgery to make him look just like the star. Now Marty and Billy have broken their silence spanning nearly 2 decades to tell of the incredible plot that will astonish millions. Elvis pulled off the switch of the century the day he faked his own death, according to the 2 members of King's closest circle. They say he hatched the amazing plot because he wanted to escape from the world stage and start a new life with his secret love, a wealthy woman known only as Maria. Incredibly, a chance meeting with a terminally ill man called Scott is said to have fueled the King's dream of a new start. Marty Lacker and Billy Smith, senior members of the Star's Memphis Mafia, have now broken their vow of silence to reveal how Elvis forked out a fortune for plastic surgery to make Scott his exact double. Elvis got cold feet and almost called off the deal. He withdrew large amounts of cash to give to a dying Scott. He already disappeared into the night in a black camper van with mysterious Maria when his body was found slumped in the bathroom at Graceland. The 2 aides say that Scott, a father of 3, had approached Elvis at the gates of his Graceland home as early as 1974 and begged the rock star to help his young family. He told Elvis that he was dying but feared for his children's future. Initially moved by the man's plight, Elvis agreed to help. But as he became more disillusioned with his showbiz career and the whole celebrity scene, Elvis began to see Scott as his ticket to freedom. The star, who was 42, truly believed that when Scott died, he would be able to swap places with him and just disappear. He shared these private thoughts with lifelong friend Marty and cousin Billy. They were the ones who eventually delivered brown envelopes stuffed with cash to tucked-away hotels where a dying Scott would collect the money and make sure his wife and children were taken care of. And they were the only ones Elvis trusted enough to say he was planning to run away with his secret love, a stunning woman that he called Maria. Marty, now a 60-year-old businessman in Memphis, recalled, We were sitting in Billy's trailer at the back of Graceland one day, and Elvis started talking about the drawbacks and pressures of his life. We didn't realize how unhappy he really was, but that day it all started to pour out. He said, there are too many people dependent on me and too much to put up with while trying to live my own life and living up to my own image. I feel alone. I'm unhappy. I wish I could be someone else living a normal life. I'm tired. I'm tired of all the pressure, tired of all these pills and people pulling on me. Marty told how Elvis fell on his knees and swore them both to secrecy as they talked. The three spoke late into the night, and Marty and Billy listened wide-eyed as Elvis laid bare the details of his astonishing plan. He told them he had already met a man who had 18 months to live. He was anxious not to leave his family destitute and readily agreed to the king's bizarre scheme. On Elvis's instructions, Scott, who had the same blue eyes and jawline as the singer, had already undergone plastic surgery to become his double. Marty says they were shown Polaroid snaps of the man after several operations, and they agreed that he was becoming a dead ringer for the star. Elvis paid Scott cash up front and agreed to pay his children huge amounts again in cash when he died. Marty said Elvis threw cash around like confetti, and it was no big deal for him to dip into his account and withdraw big bucks. When it came to Scott, Elvis said I would handle the money matters, and Billy and his wife Jo were to look after the personal side. He told us we would both be with him until the end. He even told the friends that he would reward their loyalty by writing them into his will. Although the pair never met Scott, Elvis allowed them to speak to him on the phone, but banned them from asking his surname or where he was from. Marty said, we set up a system of cash payments to Scott, which I was to see that he got. They were to be left at various motels in different parts of the country. I was warned never to look in the envelopes, just leave them at the front desk. The first thick envelope I delivered was to the Roadway Inn on my way home. As the weeks passed, more Polaroids arrived in an envelope postmarked Detroit, Michigan. The two friends saw that Scott's head was bandaged from the top down around his cheeks and jaw. He had written to tell Elvis that the operation was a success. Elvis then burned the envelope and its contents. In March 1975, they wondered if the plan had been shelved, but Elvis told them it was still on, and Scott's plastic surgeon was convinced that he was an Elvis impersonator. After one visit to see Scott, Elvis was so excited by the look-alike, he told Marty and Bill, he now looks so much like me that I could have sent him down and you wouldn't have known the difference. But he's feeling pretty sick. His illness is getting worse. My God, I've created a monster. This guy could ruin everything if someone sees him. Around the same time, Elvis began to fall for a woman that he had met by his famous music gates. Even though he was seeing Linda Thompson at the time, Elvis became convinced that he had found true love with Maria. Marty told how during 1976 and early 77, Elvis became more obsessed with Scott's health. He did not want to tour and became restless. He asked Marty to make more trips under the guise of taking care of the Presley music business, but he was actually funneling more and more money to Scott. During that time, Elvis and Linda broke up, and a few weeks later he started dating beauty queen Ginger Alden. In early 1977, Elvis made a new will in front of his dad Vernon, Billy and his wife Jo, and his lawyer, in which he signed a new page detailing how he would take care of Billy. Billy said, I refused to read it because I didn't think it would be proper, but I knew Vernon was very uneasy about it. Later, when the will was read, that page was missing. A week later, Scott's health deteriorated, and Billy claimed Elvis told him, we've got some hard thinking to do. If Scott dies now, out of town, we have to abort the whole thing. If we can't make the switch at Graceland, it's all over. Billy told him that they could smuggle Scott in the back way. When he died, Elvis would slip out the same way and meet Maria. The couple could be in the next state before the shock headlines went around the world. Billy says that they even did several dry runs to make sure the plan would go smoothly. On August 15, 1977, Billy received a distraught phone call from Scott. He said his health was going downhill and he had already said the tearful goodbyes to his family. He told Billy, I'm ready to go. Around 3:30 a.m. on August 16th, Maria smuggled Scott into the mansion. At 7 a.m. that day, Billy was helping dry Elvis's hair. The king rose from his chair, hugged Billy, and started singing, Ain't It Funny How Time Slips Away. Billy said he was excited. He laughed and he told me, I'll be calling you later. But I never saw him again. At 11 a.m., Billy saw a black camper van glide along Elvis Presley Boulevard but pushed the memory to the back of his mind. He carried out some errands, and later that day his phone rang. It was Patsy Presley Gamble, Elvis's first cousin. She was sobbing. Billy, come quickly, there's something wrong with Elvis. By the time he had raced to the house, an ambulance had already removed the body. The next day, headlines around the world screamed, "The king is dead." Incredibly, Elvis's dad, Vernon, ordered that the results of the autopsy should not be made public for 75 years. Only in the year 2052 will that secret finally be revealed. So, did Elvis Presley fake his death? This is quite an incredible story. There's all kinds of theories out there on whether Elvis could have faked his death, if he faked his death, if so, how and why. I think if Elvis were alive today, he would be like 86 years old. So even if he did fake his death, there's no assurance that he would still be alive today as an 86-year-old. That's pretty old. This is something that I have been interested in for a very long time. I don't know what family traditions you have, but in our family, one that we have is at Christmas time. We always play a game called Dirty Santa. And when you play Dirty Santa, you don't really know what you're going to get. You might get a gag gift, something silly or funny. You might get something good. You might get a gift card. You just never know. And one year at family Christmas in Tupelo, Mississippi, which happens to be the birthplace of Elvis Presley, where my meemaw lives, where my pawpaw lives, my meemaw in this game of Dirty Santa got a VHS tape called Elvis Presley Dead or Alive. And it was a documentary on VHS tape about how Elvis Presley faked his death. And when she got that video, I was a very young child, but I already thought that conspiracy theories were a fun thing. And from then on, for many, many years, every time I visited my meemaw, I popped that VHS tape in, and I was wholeheartedly convinced that Elvis Presley faked his death. And there's several books that have been written about this as well. I've read a couple of them. And the ideas are all over the map. There's this story that I just read to you, which is one of the newer ones that I have seen. But essentially, most of them contain the idea that Elvis was sick of being famous, that he was overwhelmed with his life, that he wanted to go back to being in anonymity and living a regular, normal life. Sometimes the idea is thrown out that he had debts, or that he was secretly working with the FBI, was some type of undercover agent or informant, that people were after him. There's all these ideas floated out about why Elvis Presley might fake his death. And I will say that there are some interesting things that go along with this particular conspiracy theory. There are cousins or relatives of Elvis Presley who question things about his death from the very beginning. One of his relatives happened to see Elvis's body in the casket and said that it did not look like Elvis, that it was noticeably shorter than he was, and there were some subtle differences in his facial structure that did not look like his relative. On his tombstone, for some reason, his middle name, which was Aaron, was misspelled. Elvis Presley's name, Elvis Aaron Presley, was spelled A-R-O-N, but on his tombstone, it was spelled A-A-R-O-N. Why would somebody's name be misspelled on a tombstone? And if it was a simple mistake, why would it not be corrected? This is somebody that was very wealthy. His estate could afford a new tombstone. It's kind of weird. Then there are the multitude of pictures and sightings and different things where people say they saw Elvis both immediately after he was supposed to have been dead, even on the property of Graceland, but even into years and years later in different parts of the world and country. And most of them you can just kind of write off. But some of them are interesting, especially some of the early ones that were including pictures that were allegedly taken there at Graceland days and weeks after Elvis was supposed to have passed away. And then there's reports like this one from close associates and family members who could be just trying to cash in on the conspiracy, who could be looking to make a quick buck, but who also spin a good yarn, who also tell a good story. Is it believable that Elvis was sick of being famous, that he wanted to start over, that he wanted to get away from some of the pressures and responsibilities of stardom. Yeah, that's believable, absolutely. Is it believable that he had the resources and the money, the ability to pull something like this off? Sure. As far as money and ability and resources, yes. But then you start thinking about one of the most famous people in the world at the time, faking their own death and shrinking into anonymity, never to be known or found or seen again. And that's where this starts to fall apart. And that's where this starts to seem like a rogue conspiracy theory that spawned from the fact that somebody that many considered to be a great musician and a great person died. And people just could not imagine a world without Elvis Presley. And they needed his death to be more than the fact that he just was not in good health and that all the drugs and pills that he had been taking had had adverse effects on his organs. They needed his death to be more meaningful than that. And so they're eager to believe a conspiracy theory about it. I don't know. Do you think it's possible that Elvis Presley faked his own death? Do you think it's possible that he's still alive today? If I had to give this conspiracy theory a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being completely categorically impossible and 10 being it definitely happened, I would probably give it a 3.5. A 3.5. Who am I to say that it's impossible? There's definitely, if you look into this conspiracy theory in this case, there's some odd things that happen around it. There's some weird connections. There's some distinct possibilities. But do I think that it happened? Do I think that it's likely? Do I think that, do I believe wholeheartedly today as a grown man what I believed as a small child that Elvis Presley faked his death? No. No, I don't. I don't think that. I don't buy that. I think that it could have been something that was possible back in that time, that day and age. I think that he had the money and the people and the resources to make something happen, like in the story that I read to you. But I don't think this is anything more than fairy tale and wishful thinking. They called him the king of rock and roll because so many people loved his music. And there's a lot of people that just can't imagine that he would go out the way that he did. It was very undignified, in the bathroom, in bad health, tired, out of shape, drug-riddled. And so they want to make more of his death than it was in reality. But it's an interesting story. And if you have a book about it, I'll definitely read it. And if you want to share your opinion with me about it, I'll definitely read it and share it with our audience. Let me know what you think happened. Let me know which part of this conspiracy makes sense to you. Let me know what you've heard and read about this conspiracy theory. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at intheshed4. That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 29. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Look for us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at InTheShed4. Tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines, talk some sports, and dive into the topic together of black market mummies. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scout. Meemaw, we made it!